All right, guys, let's talk plastics. So, um, so I'm gonna try to create a couple of examples. I will be creating 25 different options, but that's gonna be for the master file that I'm gonna be selling on Gumroad. If people who are impatient want to get it, but for now, I'm just gonna show you guys how to create simple plastic materials. It's a really easy setup. By the way, I'm just gonna repeat myself again. Please watch my V-Ray materials introduction, which is gonna be my first video on this playlist before you're gonna do anything else here, just because I want you to get the same results. All right, let's do it. So first thing with the plastics, by the way, to create plastics, it's a really easy setup. You just basically, what you need to change is the IOR, which is, I would recommend using IOR from 1.4 or 1.45, something like that, to 2.2. So every plastic it's gonna have a bit of a different IOR. So it really depends what you're trying to get. So the fall off of the reflection is gonna be, either a bit bigger or either a bit smaller. So you don't want to make your plastic look like a complete metal material or something along those lines, right? So you want to make it look as plasticky as possible, right? And obviously you can have solid plastics, you can have refractive plastics, and another thing you can have is uh, uh, translucent plastics, right? So for example, you're creating a lampshade or something like that. I will be creating a fabric video as well in regards of fabric materials. It's gonna be a similar approach, but I'm just gonna show you how to create simple plastics from here on, and later in the end, I'm gonna show you how to create a plastic material that's gonna be basically translucent for light, to the light. So the first things first, really easy. I'm just gonna create a white plastic, which is obviously I would recommend using uh, not whiter than 180 color, because I'm gonna repeat myself again. If you're gonna put 200, or even, I think if you're gonna put to above 200, if you're gonna use this material in a really light intense interior or exterior, that white color, it might blow out. Basically it can become overexposed, so really be careful. In general, a general rule is do not go below 1 or below 2 or something like that of the black color, right? So you don't use 0 or something like that, because in more shadowy areas that material is going to be just dead. You're not going to be able to retrieve any information from it. Another thing is, do not use a color of 255, and this rule applies to the gray materials and also the color materials, which is never use a saturated color more than, let's just say, 210, or well, in some situations you can use 220 or so. It really depends, but be really careful with these colors. I would rather go darker. If you're using, let's just say, a color of 240, let's just say a really saturated color, right? Never put this to 255. This color is gonna bleed GI like crazy. So you're gonna have to end up with some override materials, or for example, when you work, if you're working with Corona, you're gonna have to switch to ray switcher or something like that. So please, if you're using a really saturated color, right? So let's just say 250. Okay, this is quite saturated. Never use above 220 of the lightness, right? So for example, 220, I think that would be my highest. Honestly, my highest would be 200. I wouldn't go above that. So I would definitely make this a bit darker, just to make it look a bit more realistic, right? And the thing is, if you're gonna desaturate these colors a bit more with some LUTs and post-production, you can bring back the saturation really easily. That's a really easy fix. But like I said, don't make your materials look radioactive, right? So for example, you're never gonna make a material like that into your interior scene. That's just unrealistic, and it's gonna look really bad. And at the same time, it's gonna look overexposed in the lightness intensity and also in the saturated value as well. So don't try to make your textures or materials radioactive, as I call them. So try to make them as realistic as possible. Make them a bit darker, whatever. Just make them, give them the subtle, realistic look, right? Don't make them radioactive. So let's just make our first really simple white material, right? So for example, if you're making a white material, which is really a common thing, so I would put to 180, that's more than enough. It has a range of 70 to go to 255, right? So obviously when you render in OpenXR, OpenEXR 16-bit or 32-bit, you will be able to retrieve a lot of information, especially from 32-bit, right? But just be safe in the beginning. So I will use 180, and obviously you will see, I will show an example how it reacts to my HDRI in the scene. So, and always for the white color, I usually give a bit of that warmth, right? So 175, a bit more to the left side, right? Something like that. Don't make it completely, grayish, whitish material. Just give that material a bit more warmish, just to make it a bit look more realistic, right? And for the IOR, I will go this time. I will go 1.5, somewhere in the middle between 1.45 and 1.6. So obviously usually plastics have a smaller IOR value, but like I said, every plastic could be a bit different. Maybe different materials were mixed up, and so you can go to, you can even go to 2.2 if that's plastic, but you can get really reflective plastics, don't get me wrong. It's almost gonna look like a metally material, but obviously you have to be careful. So in this case, I'm gonna make just a simple generic plastic. So we're gonna apply a bit of reflection, maybe 140, not too much, right? So there we go. And I'm gonna apply a bit of glossiness. So I'm gonna try to make it a bit more matte looking, right? And for the BRDF mode, I'm gonna use GGX, and GTR tail fall off I'm gonna use as a 2, right? So basically this is a really simple material, so plastic material. So plastic version 1, right? So I'm gonna apply this material, really easy setup. I'm gonna apply this material, so I'm not using any so I'm gonna keep this material for later on, but basically I'm just gonna render a couple of regions for you guys. So I'm gonna render that because that has the highlight of the reflection. There you go, and I'm gonna render that region here as well. So these are my reflection, and obviously even this material here is a plastic material. As you can see, it has some scratches. So we will be creating some scratches. Honestly, this is almost like the same. I will take the same approach as I did it on metals, V-Ray metals video. So basically we can add some, wear and tear on the plastic if we want to, but don't over exaggerate this for your clients, because like I mentioned before, client will always want a new fresh materials. So, and that is really important when you work with real clients, right? For your personal projects, you can experiment a bit more with, to wear those materials off, maybe apply a couple of dirt maps with some other materials. But other than that, this is a really simple setup. So for example, this is gonna be version 1. Then I'm gonna create, obviously, the next really popular material is gonna be almost blackish or something like that. I wouldn't make, completely black. So that's gonna be version 2. Sorry about that. Plastic version 1. I'm just gonna copy that name and paste it throughout. So version 2. So that's gonna be black, obviously. And obviously in the black material, the reflections are gonna become a bit more intense because it's gonna reflect everything a bit better on the black surface. So there you go. That's your clean black plastic material. And obviously to your liking, you will adjust the reflection and you will adjust the IOR number, so up and down. So the lowest I would go is 1.45, that's the lowest one. And the highest I would go to 2.2, that's gonna be more than enough for plastic material. So there you go, that's the black plastic material. So obviously really easy, you're not changing the reflection color, but you can experiment with that if you want to. So for example, I'm just gonna show you what's gonna happen if you're gonna change this color for reflection if you're using a black diffuse color for the plastic materials. So as I showed in metal materials, if you want to change a metal material color, you will not change the diffuse channel, but you will change the color into reflection in the reflection channel. So that's how the materials will look more metally. That's how it works in V-Ray and Corona. So I'm just gonna show you what's gonna happen if I'm gonna change this to complete red, right? So as you can see, the material is really contrasty, but at the same time, let me just rename this guy. That's gonna be 3. So I'm just gonna experiment a bit more and show you guys how it works. So as you can see here now, this material looks nowhere near as a plastic material. It kind of starts to look like a metally material. Obviously, you maybe can get this kind of a plastic material, but it doesn't look realistic and it just looks wrong, right? So you wouldn't create plastic materials with using a reflection color, because that's the approach for the metal materials. If you want to change a color for a plastic material, I would definitely use here white and black, right? So reflection of 140, for example, and then I would go here and change the color. So for example, I will use something like, I don't know, something along this lines, right? And a really nice subtle color. Okay, and maybe a bit darker. Something 160, right? So there you go. So that's how you change the color in plastic materials. You change the diffuse color, not the reflection color, because the reflection color reacts really well to metal materials, and obviously the diffuse color will react weird with metal materials. So for plastic, use the diffuse color. For metals, use the diffuse of like a really blackish material, not 0 by the way, and use, obviously, if you want to change the color, use the reflection slot. All right, so there you go. This is our next color. So obviously you can change the color in whatever way you want. So let me just rename this to, for example, version 4. Sorry. So plastic doesn't want to update. That's weird. Let me just cancel this IPR mode because sometimes it gives me weird results. And I'm gonna do the last, sorry. It doesn't want to update. Copy. All right, that's the first. That's gonna be version 3. And I'm gonna paste the color in, right? I should get the same result. There you go. So that's our third plastic. I'm gonna save the scene just in case it's gonna crash, because always don't forget to save your scene, especially with Max. So that's our three materials there. I'm gonna create another color. So the golden rule is basically to not oversaturate your colors, right? Try to keep them as, you know, as simple and as uh, neutral as possible, just to obviously maybe something like that, right? Let's just apply this. There you go. And obviously when you're using IPR, you can experiment a bit more with a bit more greenish, more pale. And there you go. That's your generic, really easy, fast to make plastic material. And in regards of IOR, so for example, if I'm going to put this number to 2.2, obviously my reflection fall off is going to become a lot bigger. So this material obviously is going to start look like a metal material, because the IOR number is going to be so high, the fall off, the reflection fall off value is going to be so wide and big. So basically it will not matter from which angle you're going to look, you're going to get a really nice big reflection, right? So this is how real metal materials are working in real life. So obviously try to experiment with this number. I wouldn't go above 2.2 for plastic materials, just because it's gonna start to look like a metal material or something like that. So I'm gonna leave this as is, and we're gonna try to make something a bit more weird off, right? So this really easy, same approach. So I'm just gonna copy this material here. So I'm gonna use maybe a different color, uh, maybe a yellowish color, something like that, right? And the next thing you want to try to do is obviously import some kind of a dirt map, right? So for example, in this case, I'm going to use a really simple scratch material. So obviously I'm repeating myself again. So for the filtering, I'm going to use summed area 0.5, and I'm going to use a color correction just in case I will want to correct it a bit. So we plug this into reflection glossiness, and I'm gonna put this to 1010. If I want to preview this in my viewport, there we go. But this is gonna be plastic version 5, like plastic version 5, there we go. And I will use something like 8.5, and I'm gonna blend this bitmap with 50 or 30, and I will apply this here. There we go. So if we preview in the viewport, this is what we're getting. And now I'm gonna press render again. So let's just try to experiment with different colors maybe. Let's try something like that. All right, and we can try to play around with the reflection a bit more. So 200. And let's just try to put this to 9, 15 there. And there we go. We're getting a different result, obviously, a different plastic. It looks a bit more matte looking, less glossy, right? So I did apply some scratches there and here. So I'm rendering this at 1.5K just because I can zoom in and you can see the detail a bit better. I don't want to render this in 500 pixels because you're not gonna see that much detail, right? You can see the scratches. It's a really subtle effect. always try to blend your bitmaps with, you know, this value or whatever. So basically, if you're using 15% of this bitmap as a scratch material, right? So this number is going to be more dominating, right? So this glossy reflection value is like a global value. It's going to basically blur out the material. So if I'm going to plug it, you're not going to see any scratches. But if I'm going to plug this reflection glossiness, you will start seeing scratches. And you can put this into the bump map, but I wouldn't recommend doing that, just because it's gonna look really, really harsh, right? So for the bump map, if you are using a bump map, use a value of 1 maybe, or 2. It really depends, test it out, but it doesn't look really nice. And the main thing is that from a far distance, you're not gonna even see that bump map working, so it's gonna be a waste of rendering time. So if you do if you will render this material, this object from close up, obviously experiment with the bump map, because that's how scratches are made, right? You get really small indents into the plastic material or in material in general, and that's how the light is falling into those gaps, into that scratch basically. And you kind of starting to see, you know, differences in material, and it creates this like a scratchy effect. So I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. I was talking about this in my V-Ray wood material, so please check that out. And yeah, that's it. So this is the scratched material. Now we can create something a bit different. So I'm gonna put this here, and I'm gonna call it version 6. So I'm gonna try to keep this obviously as short as possible, because my first videos were a bit obviously long, but I'm trying to explain as much things as possible, so I'm gonna not try to repeat myself so often. All right, so let's create a different color now, maybe a something like that, something a bit more yellowy. There you go, and a bit darker maybe. All right, and for this thing, we're gonna create a one glossiness reflection, and we're gonna add a fingerprint. So fingerprint should work quite nicely. If I'm gonna find the material first, smudges, fingerprints, there you go. So for example, if I'm gonna show this in the viewport, and I'm gonna apply this on my object, there we go. So fingerprints are quite small, so we're gonna decrease the tiling to 4 and 4, maybe 2 and 2. 1.5 should work fine. There we go. So now we're using a one value for the glossiness reflection, and we're using 15 here. So I'm gonna introduce more of this fingerprint there, right? So as you know, the black color is gonna make the reflection more blurry, and the white color is gonna make the reflection more glossy, right? So more sharper, more cleaner. So let's just try to render a small region here. There we go. So we're starting to see some fingerprints there and here. There we go. And if I'm gonna right click, open preview window, extend it a bit, gonna render it out. As you can see, those black bits are the fingerprints, so that's what we want. If you're gonna see that the fingerprints are white, please do go to the output control and just press invert, right? Or you can do that by plugging a color correction, going there, double click there, and just press invert, so it's gonna be inverted, right? So but this is correct at the moment, so we are good to go. So so another thing is, this fingerprint might look a bit more sorry, a bit too much in the effect, right? So basically we want to try to reduce this effect by a bit, so maybe 20. So we want to get a bit of it, but not too much. Like I said, never over exaggerate with the materials, especially if you're making this project for the client, right? So if you want to give this, there you go. So this looks a bit more, natural and more realistic, okay? And don't get me wrong, you can create a lot of mixes. So you can mix two different bitmaps if you want into first slot, second slot, and then you blend it in 50% or whatever. So for example, so for the moment, I'm just gonna stop this and create another material, which is gonna be with the mix map. And so I'm gonna call this version 7. So version 7, and I'm gonna make this blackish. So 5, something like that. And I'm gonna use a mix, all right? So I'm gonna plug this color correction over there. And I will create a new one, and maybe I'm gonna switch to something like, I don't know, something like that, right? And I'm gonna plug this into one, and I'm gonna blend them both in 50% and plug it into reflection glossiness. And I'm gonna show that in the viewport just in a sec. So the fingerprints are gonna be fine, and these smudges are fine as well. So let's just see how that's gonna go. There we go. This is our black plastic, and what I want to do here is drop this to 1.6 maybe, because to my eyes this is a bit too reflective. So I'm just gonna press the IPR mode. There we go. So we're seeing some smudges and we're seeing some fingerprints at the same time. And if you want to control which one is gonna be more dominating, you can go here into the mix and you can play around with this number. So 100 is gonna be fully fingerprints. 0 is gonna be fully these smudges, right? So I want to introduce like 20% of the fingerprints. And now look what's gonna happen. So obviously, because we're using, half of that and half of that almost, we need to increase this effect here in glossiness tab, because all of these effects will be a bit weaker. So we're trying to reintroduce the effect. There you go. So we're seeing a bit of fingerprints and we're seeing a bit of those smudges there and here. So it looks kind of cool. It doesn't look that this material is, really, really new or something like that. And especially you will start seeing these smudges on the highlights. So as you can see here, you don't see anything here. You don't see anything here because it's black. There you go. You have a highlight there from the very light material. And obviously the smudges are appearing really well. So if I'm going to render that region here as well. There you go. So I'm pretty sure you're getting an idea how to obviously, execute V-Ray plastic materials. These are really, really simple materials and really fast to make. And by the way, if you're thinking that this is too simple, trust me, when you're gonna work with the clients, most of the times that's all you're gonna do. Basically, if you're gonna be in a really quick rush, you're gonna create just that, right? Obviously, the material physically has to be correct and has to look like a plastic, right? Not like a metal. But you're not going to be applying any smudges or dirt maps or anything like that, right? If you're going to have a bit more time, obviously, if you're working a company that is you're doing a massive production there, you're not going to have time to create these all kind of things and maybe test them out and etc etc. So you're going to start to try to optimize your time as much as possible. Obviously, if you have a bit more time, you can play around with some smudges or whatever. And even if the client is gonna see that, or even if you're gonna see that in your CGI, usually, if in my experience, if I'm not gonna see that, or my camera is not gonna, allocate that information there, or basically the material or the object with the material is gonna be really, really far away from the camera, I'm not gonna even bother creating this kind of a material, and more so even a complex one. So let's just just keep it simple, but try to make it correct, right? So your plastic has to look like plastic, your metals has to look like metals, your fabric has to look like fabrics, not like rubber. A lot of people are creating fabrics like they're looking like a rubber pillow, a rubber duvet, a rubber blanket, etc., etc. So I'm just trying to make a point here. Don't try to make your materials look like they supposed to look like, right? That's the main rule. And if you want to go crazy with your setup, with your material setup, you can. But like I said, every material is going to take some time. And working with real clients, you have to be really careful, because if the material is going to look too much of a wear off, the client may come back and say, why this material looks so old? Can you make it look a bit more new? So that's another thing you're going to waste your time and your money. Okay. All right, cool. So let's create. Obviously, you can have transparent plastics as well. But before I'm gonna show you that, I want to show you another thing, which is gonna be using a dirt map. So for example, how the dirt map works, I'm pretty sure you guys know, but for the beginners, I'm gonna show you a really quick example. So I'm gonna drag V-Ray blend material, there we go, and I'm gonna drag a V-Ray dirt material, there we go. So basically this is gonna be our mask, right? So black and white, so these black and white colors are working as a mask. The white is visible, black is not visible. So this is the blend material, and I'm gonna use a color of red, so you're gonna see it really, really well. I'm gonna use this complete black. Well, I'm gonna put this to 1, right? So I'm gonna drag my red color, sorry, my black color, which is gonna be the base, right? And that's gonna be my mask, basically my effect that I wanna get. So in this case, for the radius, I'm gonna put like 4 centimeters here, and I'm gonna drag this into the blend 1. Okay, and another thing I wanna do is obviously swap these colors, because I want the black on the bottom, right? And I'm gonna apply this as plastic V8 maybe. So that's gonna be plastic V8, and I'm gonna apply that here. Bam. And I'm gonna show you now how it's gonna work. So basically, so as you can see here, it applies the dirt map inside of the geometry, right? So we want to make this effect outside of the edges, right? So what we need to do here is just press invert normals. And now if I'm gonna render a really small region, this is what you're gonna get, right? So on the outside, there we go. So now what I'm gonna do is try to increase the contrast a bit of the dirt map, right? So plug the output in, enable color map, and do basically something like that. And you should start getting something a bit more heavier, and we can decrease the radius a bit. So you can control the fall off if you want to. There we go. So I can increase the contrast even more. There you go. So something like that. So for now, I'm kind of happy with my setup. And I can do the same thing now here. So for example, if I'm gonna find this scratchy material again, So I'm gonna apply this into radius because that's gonna be my radius mask. There we go. And obviously we can see that um, we need to invert this bitmap, right? So press invert, there we go. So these are our scratches. And obviously we can reduce this effect by just killing the color a bit. So if I'm gonna kill the color, you can see that you're gonna get less and less of that effect, right? Something like that, right? So now what we need to do is basically just take some random material. So for example, I'm gonna take this plastic material here and plug it there. So this is gonna be my base material, base plastic material. So I'm gonna keep this color a bit darker. So something along 50. There we go. And I'm gonna put this to 1.5. And I'm gonna drag this here and I'm gonna put some kind of a whitish material or grayish, something like that. And I'm gonna make it a bit more matte looking, right? So 7. I'm gonna plug it there. Now you're gonna see what's gonna happen. So basically it looks like, you know, it was painted this greenish color, like a teal Turkish color. And obviously, you know, in time you brushed it away and that's how it ended up looking. But we can improve this result a bit more. Obviously you can create your dirt maps with some patches, so it's not gonna be that even. So for example, if I'm gonna, you know, apply a different bitmap, something like, let's just say this one. Obviously you can see that we're getting different effect and we can invert it. There we go. This is what we're getting here. But the thing is, I wanted to put this with that with this bitmap here. So we're gonna invert this again. There we go. And we can kill the color even more. So something like that, not too much. And I want to increase the radius a bit. All right, and we can plug this into the third one as well, and we can create another dirt map. Okay, and we can put another bitmap. So for example, maybe this one, and obviously invert. So just play around with it, obviously, just to get the right result. So something like that. Now we're mixing two bitmaps. Gonna render it a bit bigger. So there we go. So I can apply this even into the other one, and I can apply a really simple map here. So for example, 3 and 3, and I want to invert this because I want that the white is gonna see the white, so that's gonna be visible. So now I will start getting these big scratches. Obviously you can increase the tiling, whatever you want to do. You can even apply this into the dirt map if you want to, but I just want to apply this onto the whole object now. So obviously this kind of plastic, it's a bit more complicated, but at the same time it is what it is. And another thing I want to try to do is take this scratchy map, bitmap, and I want to put this into reflection glossiness here all over the place. And I want to use this as a 4. So literally the whole material is going to be scratched a bit, but not too much, right? I'm going to use maybe 8. There we go. And another thing we can try to do is apply a same material 4, and I can try to apply a dirt map again. And that dirt map can be something like, something like this one, for example. I can put that to maybe 5 and 5. I will put it into the, yep, somewhere there. I'm gonna put this to 7. Let's just see how that's gonna look. All right, so this bitmap is not that bad, but I'm looking for something a bit different. All right, so this might work. And what we can try to do here now is take this bitmap. We can press invert, and we can go to V-Ray. Where is it? V-Ray color to bump. There you go. We can plug this here, and we can plug this into, well, actually we don't want to apply on every one of those, so we're gonna duplicate this and put this into the bump map. And we're gonna use maybe, I think 30 will be fine, so we're gonna have to plug this instead of this, the fourth one. So we should start seeing the bump map on the, there you go, so we're seeing some bump there. I'm not sure if this map is working fine, but it is doing something. So let me just check 50. And I think I want to change the bitmap a bit. Let's try this one. I'm gonna use 3 and 3. And for example, 10 here. I'm gonna drag this guy here and invert. And drag it here. Let's see how that's gonna look. There we go. We're getting some basically some wear and tear from the material. So it looks like obviously it's creating this kind of that the paint basically fell off or something like that. And obviously we're making a plastic material there, but you can make the same effect with a metal material as well. So for example, you would have a metal, brushed metal underneath or something like that. So you can get really different effects. Really, it's up to you to experiment. But like I said, you will never create a material like that for a client unless the project is really specific. It's for competition or something like that, or I don't know. But for a generic client that sells, tries to market their apartments, interiors, or something like that, you will never create these materials. Trust me, because those materials will be declined by the client, because usually 90% of the clients wants their materials to look new. Okay, so something like that. Obviously this bitmap is not the best, as you can see. It does work in a way, but like I said, it's not the best bitmap. So like I said, if you want to make your textures or materials look a bit more better, you have to create or find or blend or edit textures, bitmaps, dirt maps in a way that they're gonna provide you a more realistic result, right? And by the way, you can mix and match and blend and subtract and multiply, whatever you want to do with your materials, you can do that. And obviously you can blend as much materials as you want as well. But keep in mind that the more materials you're gonna blend, the longer it's gonna take to render, right? So obviously this material is gonna render a lot faster than this one, right? Because V-Ray has to sample, you know, that bitmap, that bitmap, that bitmap, 3 dirt maps, etc., etc. All right, so cool. So this effect, I think it works kind of okay. Let me try to put another bitmap, and I think we're gonna leave this for now. So maybe something more simple. Cannot remember which one I used. Let's try that one. Now let's try to invert this one more time and show it in the viewport, and the viewport shows, yeah, that's fine. So let's just try to render this really quickly, and we can move to refractive plastics. So refractive plastics are quite easy. It's really similar to glass materials. So there you go. This material looks really, really weird off. It doesn't look bad or anything like that. It's just, like I said, it looks really, really weird off. And that bump map works really, really nicely. There you go. So I think that you got an idea how to work with plastic materials. Really easy setup. Like I said, most of the times you're gonna be using this approach over there. This approach, yeah, if you're gonna have time or you have a particular project or a personal project, yeah, you will be, trying to experiment with your personal materials. All right, so the next approach will be refractive plastics, right? So same thing. There is a bit of more experimentation with that thing. I will show you a couple of examples on how V-Ray material settings are working, so you will see with your own eyes. All right, so I'm gonna call this version 9. And I'm gonna keep this, for example, as a black diffuse, right? Reflective, it's gonna be same here. I'm gonna show you how reflective colors are working as well. You can get really different options and stuff like that, but it is what it is. And I'm gonna put 150 here and 1.5 there, and I'm gonna apply this to my object. So at the moment, this is what I'm getting, a black material, right? And obviously I'm using, I can use a 4.5, I think that should be fine. And for the glossiness, I will use 94. So to give a bit of that blurry reflection, because it's plastic, so I don't want it to make completely perfect, which is obviously you can't get a perfect reflection, right? So something like that. It is possible to get that reflective material, but I usually like to add some tear and wear on it. So the next thing I'm going to do is obviously play around with the refraction, right? So obviously I have some 3D bubbles in this material. So obviously now you're starting to see some refraction, right? So in this black material. So this is already looking like a black plastic. Okay. So obviously I'm gonna leave this as is. So this is gonna be obviously clean. And so I'm gonna make a version 10. And I will apply this material on my object. And we will increase the refraction even more. There we go. This is quite refractive, and even more. So now I'm gonna experiment a bit more with this, with these settings. So you can create plastic something like that, right? So you can basically put the diffuse. So it's kind of really similar with glass materials as well. Literally refractive plastic materials and glass materials, they're gonna work completely the same. Is just the glass material will have a different IOR. Usually the glass has from 1.55 to 1.6, and obviously you increase that number to get more of a crystal look or whatever, right? But with plastic materials, it's yeah, you play around a bit in a different way, but it kind of reflects the glass material creation, right? So I should be showing this with glass materials, but I'm just gonna show you really quick examples with the plastics as well, right? Because I'm talking about plastics and you can get refractive plastics. So for the diffuse, I'm using a blackish color. For the reflection, if I'm gonna change a color, obviously you're seeing what's happening here. It kind of looks fake and unrealistic and looks, I'm not gonna lie, it looks weird, right? So do not change the color with your refractive plastics in the reflection tab, right? Try to keep them obviously neutral. Now talking about refraction color, you can play around with this. By the way, I just forgot to tell you one thing. So I just noticed it now because I was talking and I forgot about it. So basically here we did unlock the Fresnel IOR, right? So usually by default it's locked to this number. So when you change this number is going to be exactly the same as this one, because this locks to this IOR, right? That's how physically it should work, right? But usually if I know that I'm not gonna have refraction at all, I just usually unlock the reflection IOR and I just control the IOR here, which is basically it's gonna make more a bit, it's not gonna make more sense, but it's just easier to understand that, you know, this is a reflection and I'm controlling the reflection of IOR, right? But now I was showing you a refraction. So with the refraction, either you can unlock both of them and control them both together, like for example 145 145, or you can lock it. Okay, you can lock it and control this globally. So this number is going to be completely the same as there, right? So this number, it's not active anymore, so only this number is active, but when you're changing the number here, it changes there in the same way, right? So in this case, so for example, I will apply a material, sorry, I will apply this material here now, right? And if I'm gonna render, I just want to clarify this, sorry. So if I'm gonna render this here, right? If I'm gonna change this to 5, everything is gonna change, right? So it was 2. So everything is gonna change. Now look what's gonna happen here. If I'm gonna change this IOR here to 80, nothing is happening, because this number doesn't do anything at the moment, just because the refraction is 0, basically black, right? So by default it's 1.6, just so you know. So if I'm gonna change this refraction to whitish or white color, this number will start working, but this number will start working independently on this number, right? So with V-Ray, I can control these IOR numbers separately, right? So you have the full control, and to get, you know, weird effects or whatever effects you want to get there, you can do that, right? So I will log that, and I will log where is it? And I will log this one, right? So this number, I'm just gonna keep it 1.6 just for you to understand, but if I will lock it, I have to control this number here now, right? So I will apply this material here, and you can see that it looks much more plasticky than with an IOR refraction of 1.6 or 7, right? So the IOR, the bending refraction is going to be a bit different, right? So there you go. So this is your plasticky material there. And obviously, don't get me wrong, you can unlock this number and increase the reflection of it to 5, for example. So with the refraction, it's kind of gonna look like a plastic material, but your reflections are gonna be really, really intense, right? So sometimes you can get clients that are gonna say, you know, The refraction is good, but the reflection, you maxed out your reflection to 255, right? So it's the object is really reflective. And for whatever reason, the client is gonna say, can you make it more reflective? So either you can make this by controlling the IOR of the Fresnel IOR, reflection IOR, sorry, separately, and increasing this number. So basically your object is gonna be really reflective, right? Or you can use the same number, but you will bump up that reflection in Photoshop by rendering a render element of V-Ray, which is called V-Ray reflection, right? And you're just gonna basically overlap that reflection with linear dodge add or screen or whatever is gonna work for you, right? But usually I use linear dodge add, right? Sorry, was it linear dot add? I just forgot about it. But yeah, you can bump this up inside of Max, or you can bump this up in with the reflection pass. But like I said, if you have time, yes, you will be spending time in Photoshop. If you don't have time, then so for example, if I'm gonna create new, and if I'm gonna create a new one, then blah. So I usually gonna use linear dodge add, right? So that's gonna be your original render, and that's gonna be your reflection element. So you're gonna bump that on top, and you're gonna press and pull it to linear dodge add, right? Or screen, they should work both. Usually I use linear dodge add or screen, but linear dodge add, you have to decrease the opacity a bit to something like that, because if you're going to use 100%, that reflection is going to be insanely strong. So you're basically doubling the reflection. And linear dodge add works a bit differently in 32-bit. In 16-bit, it works a bit weird, not in a really correct way, but it does work quite well. But it works really well in 32-bit. Anyways, just play around and see which one looks the most realistic, right? And by the way, if you have any questions, just please comment in the bottom, or I will try to reply that as soon as possible. So this is our really simple material here. That's version 10. So obviously this is a bit darker, this is a bit lighter, and we're using the IOR of 145 for both, right? So this is locked, this is unlocked, but obviously I want to lock it at this moment. So I'm gonna create another example, which is gonna be 11. And now I'm gonna experiment a bit more with those colors, right? So I'm gonna apply this here, apply the material, and I'm gonna press the IPR mode. And I'm gonna start playing with the colors a bit. So I'm gonna be rendering light cache, so you will see obviously the main preview. And we're gonna be rendering some regions. By the way, just so you know, reflections and refractions are the slowest to render, so just keep that in mind. By the way, you can change the max depth, so you're gonna get more bounces for the reflections and the refractions. For example, if I'm gonna put that to 5, you will see some things will change. The refraction is gonna change a bit, right? So for example, I'm gonna put that to 20. Bam, you're seeing a bit more detail into refractions, and obviously you will see some changes into reflections as well. But be really careful with these numbers, just because if you're getting some artifacts or some black areas in your material that is not working properly, increase this number really really carefully, because this number will increase your rendering time, your calculations, etc, etc. If you can get away with 5, use 5. If for some reason something is not working correctly, try to increase that to 10 or 8, or increase this number, so when it's gonna be, if your issue is gonna go away, leave that number at that point, right? Let's just say some reflections or some refractions are becoming black inside, so just try to obviously increase this number and play around with it. So if you have a mirror behind your glass panel, you will have to increase that number for your mirror and for your glass in front of the mirror. So just keep that in mind as well. So at this moment, I'm gonna leave this at 5.5 because it's more than enough. Obviously, you have a lot more options, but I'm not gonna talk about all of them. I'm just gonna talk about a couple of them. So if you want to change the color for your object, really easy, you change the refraction color, and that's the easiest way to do it, right? So bam, this is your, it's gonna become darker and darker and darker. So for example, I want this reddish color or this bluish color. It's gonna be really light. Bam. Literally, this is radioactive. Oh, this is radioactive. It literally glows. I'm joking, but yeah, don't make materials like that. Try to you make them subtle material, something like that, because they will look more realistic in the renderers, right? So if I'm going to increase this to 20, enter, you see the reflections a bit more, looks a bit more natural, and I'm going to use that to 20. Bam, the refractions are looking more natural as well. You're getting more detail basically from your reflections and your refractions. But it will be slower to render, just keep that in mind. So I'm gonna leave it 2020 for, well, I'm gonna leave this at 5 and 5 just in case someone is gonna pick this material up. So this is the refraction color, right? So you're going less, gonna be less of that material, and etc, etc. So just experiment with the material. If you want to change the color, please do darker, lighter, whatever. Don't go above 200. Honestly, don't do that. With the color, yes, you can go, more saturated, but then just try to control this down a bit. Don't use 255 color, please don't do that. That's just wrong. Okay, so 200 for now. Bam, there we go. Maybe 180. There we go. So let's just say I'm gonna pick something like that, and I'm gonna show you another approach. So I'm just gonna desaturate this color completely. Okay, so this is like a gray plastic material, and obviously another thing you can control is you have the glossiness on the reflection, right? And you have the glossiness on your refraction. So you can start making like a frosted glass material, or frosted. This applies same for glass materials as well, right? Now another thing to mention, to render this effect, which is called glossiness for refraction, it's really slow. I don't care, are you gonna be using F-Storm, Corona, or V-Ray? It will be slow. It will be slow, and in some situations it can give you a lot of noise. So be really careful with this number, right? So you can get away with lower values. So the lower you go, the longer it's gonna take to render, right? So be really careful with this number. You will be creating some, obviously there are some workarounds to create frosted glass, but that's gonna look kind of fake. The most realistic way is obviously this way, but it will take some time to render, so just keep that in mind. So this is how you create frosted glass. So if you're gonna go a bit lower, then I would say 0.65, 0.7, that's the lowest number you should go, because you're not gonna see anything through it, but obviously you will see some silhouettes through the glass. So at the moment I'm gonna keep this at 1. Obviously we're gonna keep this simple, and I'm gonna show you another approach, which is gonna be so-called fog color. So this color reacts like a, I don't know how to explain, but it's basically how far the light reaches, right? So really hard to explain, but something like let me try to explain you guys. Tropical, there you go. So So something like that. So basically, this is the depth. Um, so how deep the surface is, right? So for example, that is like what, 10 centimeters from the water surface to the ground. That is maybe, 50 centimeters, and so on and so on. It's get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, right? So the light scatters a lot better here than the light scatters over there. So the light maybe, I don't know, uh, dies after like 1 meter or so, right? So that's why there is a lot, that water there is really deep, and the light doesn't scatter that well anymore. It dies after like 1 meter or 2 meters, and basically you're getting like a blackish darkish water. So this is something similar, right? So when you would be creating a, let's just say, a swimming pool or something like that, right? And you would create, you could make this a bit more, bluish or whatever. So for example, this is deeper, and I'm going, higher and higher, and the color will become a bit more brighter, as you can see here. For example, 05. So the minimum number is 0, the maximum number is whatever you want to go with, right? Usually 1, that's the end of the number. I don't know why V-Ray is not capping this to 1, because I'm not seeing a lot of difference from 1 to 80. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. But usually if you're gonna go lower numbers, you will get things like that, right? So you're gonna get a really, really subtle effect, right? So it's gonna work a bit in a different way rather than just refraction. Um, but you can create really nice effects with both of these, right? And the fog bias is basically the contrast, right? So you can go -1, so it's gonna start increasing that contrast, right? Or it's gonna make subtle, you're gonna go up, for example, 0.5, 0.3, 0.1, and I can start increasing this number to 105. You can get really different effects, as you can see here, right? So I can go with a darker color. Okay. I can go with a lower number here. And you just basically play around until you're gonna get the most satisfying result, right? You're controlling that number, and this color, right? You can even put a bitmap, but I'm not seeing the point of a bitmap to use it here, right? So another thing just want to show you guys is basically, so this is the fall color. It's really useful for glass objects, glasses, glassware, and all of that stuff. But obviously you can use a, so I'm gonna put this to 1. So you can see what I'm getting with effect of 1, right? So for example, I'm gonna put that to 0, to 1. So with 1, basically you're seeing a full result, right? So if I'm gonna increase this to 5, it's gonna get a bit less of that contrast, right? If I'm gonna use 20, basically you're not seeing any contrast. So if I'm gonna go lower than 0, for example -2, the contrast will increase dramatically for this color, right? And it's going to be obviously more saturated, but basically this is the contrast, this is the bias, right? The bias in 3ds Max is basically like a contrast value. So let's just say I'm going to use minus 0.05. So now you're seeing a different effect here. So basically I'm controlling the depth of it. So with this number, so I'm going to go 2, and it's gonna become stronger and stronger, but only in the locations like that. So this number is just a number. It's not like 2 is gonna go like this, 3 is gonna go like this, right? You have to really experiment with it and get the most satisfying result that you want. Keep in mind, this is only the color and how it works, how it scatters, how much contrast are you pulling on this color as well, etc, etc. So you can get really nice different effects, so keep that in mind as well. But these numbers are just numbers to control the effect, right? Another thing is, so for example, I'm gonna put this to 0, sorry, to 1. So 1 is by default, right? So I'm getting this full color, right? And this I'm gonna put to 1. So now look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna change the refraction to, let's just say, pinkish color. So as you can see here, I'm getting a completely different result again. So I'm not saying that you cannot control refraction color and the fall color. You can. It's just gonna give you different results, right? You can get different color values, hues and all of that stuff. So for example, I'm mixing now the blue with the yellow colors, and I'm kind of getting this greenish result, right? So I can go lower, lower, higher. So I'm getting these really nice effects, right? So lighter, that's radioactive a bit, but you know what I'm getting, right? So saturated, put something like that, for example. And I can go this by 2. Obviously, I can increase the contrast to 0.5, minus 0.5, maybe -1, my -2. Whoops, that's a bit too harsh. 1. And obviously, you can see that you're getting really different effects in this geometry, right? So I usually don't like mixing refraction with the fog color. I usually keep the refraction as this color, and then I usually play around with the 0.5. I usually play around just with the bias, with the color of the fog color. You know, it's gonna be more intense or not really, or something like that. And obviously, then you control with the depth of it, right? So how that light is gonna scatter, right? For example, if I'm gonna go 1, I'm gonna go back to the color, and I'm kind of liking this effect. If I'm gonna go with 0, obviously, sorry, with 1, I'm gonna get that full color at 1 value there, but I'm pretty sure it makes sense how to work with these things. And this applies for glass as well. Well, actually, this is like a glass, but obviously we're using a different IOR, and it creates obviously a plasticky look to it. So this is how you manipulate with these plastic materials. There is another thing to mention, which is obviously you can't get self-illumination, but I will create a different video in regards of lights in general. So can you use where can you use V-Ray light material, where can you use self-illumination and V-Ray physical light, etc., etc. But for now, I just want to introduce you a bit more with these plastic materials, right? And how can you create them? Obviously, just so you know, you can put this to a really a matte looking reflection if you want to, and then you can export. In general, glossiness should be the same as glossiness for the refraction, but like I said, you can play around in whatever way you want. So for example, I'm gonna get now a glossy reflection, but the refraction is gonna be really sharp, right? So you can manipulate this in whatever way you want. So I'm gonna put this to 95, and that's gonna be our plastic version 11. So now I'm gonna create another version, which is gonna be, so I'm just gonna show you, talk about where can you use this material, right? So you have this so-called translucency. So you can use this object because, this model here of translucency. Obviously you have fast SSS, but I'm not going to talk about it now because it's a bit, well, it's kind of more complex thing to approach. But translucency mode is quite useful. You need to experiment with it a bit more, but basically what it does, it scatters the light into your object, right? So So usually the light will scatter. I mean, honestly, in reality, this object will create caustics and will create some light scattering inside of this model, because obviously it's refractive, it's glass, it's plastic, whatever. It will do those things, but obviously V-Ray is faking a lot of things, and everything starts to look a bit more flatter and more fakish, obviously. But you can get really, really realistic results with V-Ray. I'm not saying anything, but obviously at the cost of the rendering time, right? So I want to show you another thing. So let me just check. So this was okay. So I want to apply this material here. So the translucency, right? So a lot of materials, like, you know, even human skin has translucency. Candles have translucency as well. So how far the light is gonna scatter, and basically the object is gonna look, you know, a bit more lighter and stuff. So I'm just gonna click here. For example, the hybrid model is gonna look according to V-Ray documents, docs online, hybrid model gives you the most realistic result. So just to simplify this, guys, I did import a material which is a translucent material. So this material is a bit more complicated. I have no shorter way of explaining about it. So basically, this is the tab here that I'm gonna be talking a bit and experimenting for you guys. Mostly it's troubleshooting the material. Mostly you're gonna end up by rendering it and testing it, how it looks, and what desired result do you want to get from it. But there is no presets like, you know, oh, I want to get a wax model, or I want to get a skin shader. You're gonna have to troubleshoot it and test render it for it. But obviously these are gonna be the settings. And another one, complex one, is gonna be the fast SSS2, but I'm not gonna talk about it now because it has a lot of settings here to play around with. But obviously it has presets like pink, yellow, skim, milk, whole, white, ketchup, cream, potatoes, and whatever. So obviously this is a more complex one, but in regards for a simpler one, I did import a model which was from my kitchen living course, which is basically a pendant light, and that pendant light has a geometry piece that it's obviously it obviously has thickness, as you can see here. So that's the thickness. It's a really thin plastic material, but obviously I have a ring light going around it, and that's why it makes that translucent look. So for example, I'm going to show you a quick example in regards of how it looks. So you can create plastic lampshades with it, etc., something along those lines, right? So I'm gonna go up with my camera a bit, and I'm just gonna press the IPR mode really quickly. There you go. So that's your translucent material there. So obviously you will use a translucent material with objects that has thickness. If the object doesn't have thickness, you should end up using V-Ray two-sided material. So I'm talking about one plane or something like that. So basically a 3D object that doesn't have thickness. If the object has thickness, you should end up using a fast SSS2. By the way, that would be my second option. The first option would be V-Ray material with translucency on. Either the hard wax model algorithm or the hybrid algorithm. So this is what kind of effect are you getting? So basically I'm getting a light. So that material is, let me just pick it up. So this is the material. Obviously I'm using a white warmish material with some reflections. And I'm using, obviously the fog color has to be whitish or darkish. I'm just gonna talk about these options soon, but for now the fog color is gonna be white. The refraction, you have to have a bit of refraction or quite a lot of it. It really depends what kind of result are you getting. So for example, in this case, if I'm going to increase the refraction, obviously my translucent effect is gonna blow out a bit. I mean, it's gonna be a bit overexposed. If I'm gonna go back, obviously you're seeing that it's a more subtle effect. So you're kind of controlling the translucency with your refraction value, with your, sorry, the color, the fog color. You can control it with fog multiplier as well. And then you have the light multiplier intensity. So in regards of, so you can apply this texture, this material onto, for example, you have a cylinder and that cylinder has thickness like, I don't know, 0.5 centimeters or so. And you apply this material and let's just say you're gonna put a light bulb inside of that cylinder. So basically that cylinder will be translucent to light, right? So it will scatter the light through it. So it kind of gonna, it's gonna start looking like a lampshade, right? So, but talking about these settings, honestly, they don't make a lot of sense in the beginning, but later on, when you experiment with this a bit more, you kind of starting to understand. So basically, I'm looking at the translucency tab now only. So for example, it says here on V-Ray docs, Resolution selects the algorithm or for calculating blah blah blah, right? So you have hard wax, soft, and hybrid. So note that the refraction has to be on. So that's why you cannot use a refraction color of black. Well, you can, but that's just gonna basically almost disable the effect. You're not gonna see the effect. And currently only single bounce scatter is supported. So obviously fast SSS 2 that supports more bounces in GI, etc. It's more complicated approach, but this is a more simpler approach, but in a way you have to get your head around it. So so we're talking about these different algorithms. Hard wax model, this model is specifically suited for hard materials like marble. So you can use this for plastic as well, just because it's a hard surface material as well. Soft water, that's according to V-Ray, this model is mostly for compatibility issues, blah blah blah. So I wouldn't use this one. I tried to use this, but it gives really weird effect and it gives me a lot of noise, and I wouldn't use this for now. Hard wax, that's the first one for hard surfaces. Hybrid model, this is the most specific SSS for skin, milk, fruit juice, and etc., right? So in our case, just because we're creating a plastic material, we're gonna try to stick with hard wax. And for example, talking about those scatter, I don't know how to pronounce this word, but scatter coefficient, um, specifies the amount of scattering inside the object, right? So a value of 0 means rays will be scattered in all directions. So basically the light will be scattered in all directions, up and down and left and right, right? A value of 1 means the ray cannot change its direction inside the subsurface volume. So basically it's gonna have just a one direction as I understand it. So I'm not sure if someone could elaborate on that, but I think the best approach for me would be try to test it out and see how it looks. Obviously, you would have to test it out with different light conditions, because obviously maybe with one light condition, this effect here, you're not gonna be able to see it. And I've noticed that in a lot of things. Forward back coefficient controls the direction of scattering for a ray. A value of 0 means the ray can only go forward away from the surface inside the object. 0.5 means the ray equal chance to go forward and backward, and 1 means ray will be scattered backwards forwards. So we're gonna test it out a bit, and I'm gonna just show you guys how it works. Thickness, well, that makes sense, but obviously I was changing this value and it wasn't giving me that result that I wanted. So thickness, what it means is basically, if you, let's just say you have an object of 1 meter, right? The thickness of an object is 1 meter, and let's just say you're specify 10 centimeters here, right? So in my understanding, the light should dye after 10 centimeters that it went into the object, right? The light should die after 10 centimeters, but the thing is I tried this and it didn't look like it worked correctly. Maybe I misunderstood something, but it doesn't look that it's working accordingly. Backside color, normally the color of the subsurface scattering effect depends on the fog color. So you can control the fog color if you want to. So for example, you can control the fog color here instead of this one, as I understand it from here. And this parameter allows you to additionally tint the SSS effect, so you can increase the effect even more. So for example, you create a yellow color there and you create a more reddish yellowish color into the fog color, and you will get, you know, a really intense color. And obviously this makes a lot of sense. Light multiplier, basically your scattering effect is gonna just look a lot more intense, right? So you can blow it out to whatever number you want. So let's just try to obviously test render it out a bit and see how it looks. So as you can see, the settings here that I used the hard wax model. Everything is quite simple, a bit of refraction. Everything here is by default, as you can see, default, 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 default. And it's a really easy approach. White material, reflective, a bit of refraction, everything here by default, and that's the hard wax model. And everything here is by default. And as you can see, it's working perfectly. So now if I'm gonna switch this to IPR mode, there we go. So if I'm gonna reduce this to the fog color to a lower color, you can see that the effect is getting a bit weaker. And if I the same thing with the refraction. So if I'm gonna make this color a bit darker and even darker and even darker, as you can see here, basically you're not gonna see the translucency effect at all. If you're gonna be pulling this more towards white color into the refraction, you're kind of gonna blow this effect out, right? So obviously you can please do experiment with this, because like I said, you apply one option, one preset on, for example, this object, and let's just say you apply the same settings material on another object in another lighting conditions, and you're not gonna get the same result. Basically the light is gonna be from another direction or something like that, or the thickness is gonna be different, and obviously there is no one option approach, right? So please do play around with it. So as you can see, even the fog color affects the look of it. So like I said, default options work quite well. Obviously just 2 clicks, you just change the color, change the reflection, put a bit of refraction, and choose the hard model, and usually you're gonna be good to go, right? But I'm just gonna if you want to end this video right here, I mean obviously you can. This is gonna be the last material that I'm gonna be talking about on this video, but I think I wanted to obviously show this to a bit more depth to people to see how it works, because I'm not sure if there's any videos. I cannot remember if there are any videos showing some examples how it works on YouTube, how translucency, V-ray translucency is working. So for example, I will delete this material. First of all, I need to open, because I'm having this kind of bug with V-ray next, and I'm just gonna close everything here, and I'm gonna delete all of that, right? So I don't need that. So I'm gonna go to my main camera and I'm gonna apply the same material. I think that was the same, I cannot remember now. So hybrid, no, I'm gonna use a hard wax 0 1 default, and I'm gonna use 1000 by default. I'm gonna use a white color, and I'm gonna use 1 as a multiplier and fog color as a white color. And refraction, I'm gonna use, let's just say 50 for now, right? Reflection, everything else looks the same, right? So plastic version 12. And I'm gonna apply on my object, and I'm gonna press IPR mode. So as you can see now instantly in in the light cache preview, you already see that this object is scattering some kind of a light. It's not that white solid that we created before, right? So for example, I'm gonna apply this one. You can see that it looks quite solid, and it doesn't look that it's obviously letting the light through it, right? So, and as you can see, the rendering speed is a lot faster. So now look what's gonna happen when I'm gonna switch to this translucent material. So you saw that this object became like a milky looking object, and obviously the rendering times are a lot slower, and you're starting to see some light scattering inside of the object, honestly only from the light cache preview. So this is how it's working. So I'm just gonna pick, it's a shame that I cannot pick a couple of regions obviously at one time. So, but you can see the bubbles inside, they're kind of looking obviously weird, but in a way we're just gonna experiment with this a bit more. So I'm just gonna draw a region here. And we obviously gonna experiment with this a bit more. So obviously I'm using an HDRI, and I have a dummy light on the left side that we can experiment with. So for example, with the refraction, is, as you know, if I'm gonna go black, it's gonna be faster to render because we're not gonna see any effects of that translucency, so they say. So if I'm gonna use a white color of a refraction, obviously that effect is gonna be stronger, but at the same time my object is kind of getting more refractive. So in this case, I've noticed that if you use a color of somewhere around 40 or 50, it does do the job. So basically your object is getting that translucency effect. So so we can try to play around a bit with these settings and see what we are getting. So now what I did here is basically I increased the refraction. So let's just say 240, right? So that's the so they say, when V-Ray says that you have to enable refraction, so I did enable refraction almost to full 240, and it seems that the translucency effect is getting a lot stronger, but at the same time you have to play around with the fog color, which obviously, as you can see that the light scatters a bit better, right? So if I'm gonna switch this to 0, so there's not gonna be any light scattering. As you can see, it's completely black. So now I'm gonna switch to, for example, 1 centimeter. So like I mentioned before, what in my understanding, when I switch to 1 centimeter, I should see that light scattering, I don't know, maybe 1 centimeter from the surface. But at the same time, if I switch to 0 to 1, I'm getting the same result as I would get with 1000 centimeters. And that's the most annoying bit for me with this approach, because for a beginner this will make no sense. Because I mean, if I want to for the light to go through only 1 centimeter, then obviously it makes sense. But 1000 centimeters should look maybe a bit different or something like that. I mean, accordingly, if I would switch to 1 centimeters, I would only want to see the light scatter through 1 centimeter from the surface. But other than that, this doesn't look that it's worked correctly. So the light color, so the color is working perfectly fine, as you can see. So as they say, you can control this color and you can control this color here as well, right? So you can get different kind of effects by controlling these two different colors. So I'm gonna keep this at yellowish or a bit warmish, something like that. All right. So now look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna control the fog color to black. So nothing. So if I'm gonna control this to white, obviously you're seeing that the light scatters a lot more, and at the same time we're getting slower rendering times. So with the refraction, same thing, you can control the effect a bit. So you can see that the black refraction, the translucency is not working at all. If we are switching to the whitish color, obviously the translucency effect is getting more stronger and stronger. And if we're gonna pick this to darkish color, obviously the effect is gonna be, it looks like it's getting a bit smaller, right? So now another thing to mention is to show is scatter coefficient. So basically I'm gonna change this now to from 0 to 1. I just want to see the example and what is the outcome. So now the outcome, as you can see, it's a bit different. The scattering effect, it was a bit different from zero, as you can see here. From 0 to 1, it looks a bit different. On 1, it looks a bit flattish, because as they say on their where is it, scatter coefficient, special amount of scattering side of the object. Value means arrays will be scattered in all directions, right? A value of 1 means array cannot change its direction. So it looks like I'm getting a better result with 0, right? It looks a bit more realistic, right? So you can see the scattering effect on the edges, and you can see the scattering effect on this edge as well, right? When I switch to 1, it doesn't look like it, right? So it does look a bit flattish. When I switch to 0, it does look a lot better, right? So now another thing to show you guys is to back and forward coefficient, right? Back and forward controls the direction of scattering of ray. Value 0 means ray cannot only go forward away from the surface inside the object. This is this is a bit different as well. For the beginners might look complicated, but like I said, I showed you in the beginning how to use a really simple approach. Is basically applying color reflection and refraction to white, controlling the fall color and choosing this to the hard surface, and you're good to go if you want to create a lampshade or something like that. But if you want to take this a bit more further, I will tell you this: try to experiment with this as much as possible. So for example, now I switch to from forward to back coefficient to from 1 to 0, and as you can see, you're getting different results as well. So it really depends what you're trying to get, right? So I'm gonna put that to 0.5, and you're getting a more intense scattering, and I'm gonna switch that to 1. And now I'm gonna do the last thing is obviously I'm not gonna change the thickness, because we noticed that the thickness doesn't do a lot, which was really weird. So the color will react, right? So we can't change the color. So it's gonna scatter the light, that color, throughout your object. And light multiplier, obviously that should work perfectly fine. So basically you're multiplying the light intensity that is going through the object, right? So this light multiplier will multiply the effect, and as you can see, you're getting this kind of a milky plastic, really nice object. If I'm gonna scatter that out, so you can see that this object definitely has some scattering to it, right? It does look really nice and realistic, but I will tell this: if you're rendering for an animation or a really big resolution image for your client, be really careful with this translucency effect. Even sometimes I'm creating wax, candle wax, a white candle wax materials without any translucency. I'm just applying a warmish white color with some reflection, and I'm putting a glossiness of 0.65 or so, and that usually does the trick, because clients usually don't care if the object, is translucent or not. There is a candle, there is a light. Obviously the client will understand that it is a candle, there is a light, and but if that object is not scattering any light, trust me, you're not gonna get in any trouble or anything like that, unless you're rendering that candle from a close-up, like literally your camera is pointing to that candle, etc., etc. So in that case, you would need to play around with either the translucency effects or either switch to fast to SSS, fast SSS 2. Right, so there you go. This is a really nice plasticky material, and as you can see, it has some translucency to it. Obviously, you can change the color there. You can change the color there. You can change even the. Sorry, let me just rejoin there. You can change the fog color and the refraction. Just like I said, play with the refraction, play with the fog color. You can even play with this effect as well because it will give you different results. So as you can see, the effect is getting weaker, so I'm not getting a lot of translucency, if at all. So if I'm going to switch that to 1, obviously I'm going to get the full effect of it. So like I said, refraction, fog color, fog multiplier, you can play around with that. That's basically just intensity, and the intensity of your translucency effect. Hard model will work with any hard surface material. Usually 0 scatter coefficient works really well with every situation. Forward and backwards coefficient, I would try to experiment with this. Usually by default 1 works really well. Thickness, I didn't notice that it does a lot of difference with your object unless we're talking about different lighting situation or different model. Backside color works really well, and you can change the color. And light multiplier, basically it will give you a more intense light throughout your object, as you can see here. And obviously, even from the light cache preview, you can see that this object is getting a lot of translucency effect, right? And obviously, if I would make this ball a light material, for example, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get a lot of translucency in the object. So there we go. So if I'm gonna switch now to the region render, we should get some translucency throughout the object. There you go. So you can see that the light, that warm light, is scattering throughout the object into the outside. And it does look really cool. Now, I don't know about this edge here, so either, let me just try to play around with this a bit. So for example, I'm just gonna copy this material there and just make a duplicate. And if I'm gonna play around with this to 0, I'm getting the same thing. Put it to 1, put it to 1. All right, so that thing is removing itself, but it kind of looks ugly. Thickness, put it to 5. So there we go. The thickness, it's kind of dead, honestly. I'm not sure if the thickness is working at all. So 0, 1. So 1 and 1000. What's the difference? Okay, so now in this lighting situation, in this lighting condition, we definitely can see that the thickness is working a lot better, right? So when I was testing thickness here, I didn't see any results. Now talking about this one, if I'm gonna put this to 5, we can see, sorry, to 1 maybe, we can see that the translucency is basically killing itself a lot faster. When we're putting to 1000, it gets more milky, it gets more translucency from the light. All right, so I think I kept this way too long already, but obviously if you want to change the color of this object, you can change the color. Obviously just change the color there if you want to. It should take effect as well. But as you know, this object is translucent, so whatever you're gonna change, try to play around with the fog color and with the backside color. if you want to really, you know, make this object in some kind of a color that you want to make, just because this object is translucent and it's gonna this light color is gonna scatter throughout your object. So you can leave the diffuse to white or whatever you want to try to experiment with. You know, if I'm gonna make this to black, I could get different effects, but as you can see here, if I change this to black, I'm kind of getting the same result, because obviously this is a completely refractive material. So play around with the refractive setting, fog color, and maybe backside color and thickness and light multiplier. But like I said, to every lighting situation is gonna be a bit different. But by default, this material, this hard wax model, is like good to go, right? So 0, 1, 1000, play around with the color, play around with the light multiplier, fog color, and the refraction, and you should get some nice effect from this translucency. Not a lot of people are using this just because maybe it's taking too much time to set up, or you know, it's not worth it. I'm not sure. Even I, in 12 years of experience, I barely use this, honestly. I cannot remember when was the last time I used it, just because it just makes no benefits for the client or anything like that. You just bash out the projects as obviously as fast as possible and as best as possible, but it's not like your client is gonna notice that, oh, that guy is not using a translucency material, it looks crap. Even if the client sometimes can reply, you know, can you make this material look more realistic, like wax or like something, you know, along this side, sends the reference or something like that. Yes, then obviously you will spend that amount of time, you know, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes just to make it look right. But other than that, like I said, it's not really worth it even to use a fast SSS. And I'm talking exclusively here about architectural visualizations. I'm not talking about special effects or, you know, organic modeling or something like that. So I hope this made some sense to you guys. Obviously, the simple plastic materials are way easier. When you start to play around with translucency materials, you could spend a bit more time. So obviously be careful with that, because keep in mind that translucency materials, they tend to render a lot slower, right? So because obviously, and I'm not talking even about fast SSS2, that's quite slow as well. So be really careful with it. So thank you for watching this video, guys, and please like and subscribe. You're gonna help me a lot, and don't forget to share, because I think that's really important. I want to reach as much people as possible, just to get you know, just to get them a bit more help in learning V-Ray. And yeah, that's about it, guys. Thank you for watching and take care.